One of the first things that I learned, and I still use today, is what does good look like? And this is exactly what you said. You have to define for yourself, no matter where you are, what does good look like and where do you want to be? And I think the easiest thing to do is to look at your peers. Look at someone. Maybe you're going to say someone doesn't do the same thing or they're in a different specialty than I am. But still, for yourself, what are you striving for? What do you think is realistic? What could be similar? Or more importantly, what don't you like? Maybe there are things that you notice that I want to make sure I don't do that. So I think that that's so important. And welcome back to another episode of Med Creator 101. I'm Mimi Banks, the CEO and founder of MB Social, and I'm joined by my co-host, the amazing Dr. Dustin Portella.
Hello again, Mimi. We're excited to share some really great content for you as you build your social media brand today.
Totally. But before we start, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. And we just did this with our team today, but I thought it would be fun to do some rapid fire questions if you're down.
I'm ready for it.
All right. So coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee all day.
Okay. Early riser or night owl?
The problem is I kind of do both. So if I had a choice, I would be a night owl and I would sleep in, but I don't get that luxury.
Same, not with a 1-year-old. Sweet or salty?
Salty. Yeah, especially for road trips. I need those salty snacks.
So that brings me to the next question, driving or flying?
I'd rather fly. I don't mind driving, but yeah, I'd get on an airplane. I don't mind that.
I can't handle drives. I'm just not a drive person. Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, Coke Zero.
Coke Zero in Europe. I would double down on that.
Okay. I don't have the palate to really know between those two.
I challenge you the next time you go to Europe, try it and see if you can tell the difference.
I'll do that.
Dogs or cats?
I'm more of a cat person, actually.
Really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Call or text?
Text.
Instagram or TikTok?
Nowadays, I'd say Instagram.
I would say same. Sweet or sour?
Sweet.
Night in or out?
I will go night out.
Here's where I want to go a little bit deeper. What was your first job?
My first job was moving sprinkler pipe. So I grew up in a farming town, and before everybody had these big pivots that would go around the fields, they would rely on usually teenagers to go move sprinkler pipe, where you had to go and hook them up, and you would carry these 3 or 4 inch pipe, and they'd weigh, 60 pounds or something like that. They'd run half the day. You'd go change them at night. You'd have to get up and do it again in the morning, and they'd run for 12 hours. But I actually did it for the school district. So I would move pipe on the football field, on the elementary yard, on the baseball field. And that was the first real summer job that I had.
And it kind of trained you for what you do as a physician for working all the time or early in the morning or evening shifts, no?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have to get up ridiculously early because we weren't at the beck and call of a farmer who might be, having to harvest or plant or something like that. But it had to be done twice a day, every day. There was no excuses. You couldn't call in sick. It had to get done.
Wow. Okay. I definitely learned something new here. I like these. Okay. A few more. What's your hidden talent?
I would say I'm really good with kids. I don't know if that's a talent, but I love being a dad. I've always been good with kids, but I don't know that I really have a hidden talent. It's been a long time, but I used to play the trumpet.
There you go. So you're musical. I didn't know that either. Another burning question. Is your bed made right now?
My bed is made, but I didn't make it. I wasn't the one that made it. So
amazing. Okay. So there's definitely more to come there. Learning a lot about you outside of your Instagram or TikTok and all things social media. So I wanted to dive into something that's at the heart of people who are really interested in becoming a medfluencer, and that's building your brand. I wanted to talk to you about how you built yours.
Yeah, this is an important part of having a social media presence, especially if you want to make more of it than just being a casual poster or posting pictures of your kids or, a hobby or something. If you want people to see it to gain more followers, I think it's really important to have a cohesive brand and a brand strategy behind that.
Could not agree more. And it's funny because when I was thinking about this, I think I mentioned this to you. When I first met you, you were 208 Skin Doc, and then you were Dr. Dustin Portella. And now you're known as Dr. Dustin. So it's a really big question about your brand, but let's start at the beginning. How did you decide to actually create a brand? And how did you come up with 208 Skin Doc and why?
When I started, as we talked about a little bit on the first episode, my goal in getting into social media was just the free marketing to get people into my practice And so I think the first name that I had on Instagram was Boise Derm Doc. I really wanted people to just come in. But when I opened my practice, sometime within the first year, we got a cold call. I think it was just an email that came in. Somebody had secured a vanity phone number. So, and the vanity phone number was the area code for Idaho, where I live, is 208. So the number that they had was 208 Skin Doc, and they wanted to know if we would purchase that phone number for our clinic. And I negotiated with them for the price, and I paid for it. And I thought, this is a great phone number for advertising. If I want to put it on a flyer or on a billboard, 208 Skin Doc is going to be very easy to remember. And it tells the message of who you're calling and what they do. It's pretty straightforward. And because my goal with social media was just to bring people into the clinic, I decided I'm going to make this a cohesive strategy across all social media. And my Instagram name is going to change to 208 Skin Doc. My TikTok name originally was 208 Skin Doc. And my original YouTube channel was 208 Skin Doc, because whenever somebody found me online, I wanted them to know this is my phone number and this is how you're going to come and see me as a patient. So that is where 208 Skin Doc came from, is some company that just secures vanity phone numbers and resells them for a profit.
Wow. And so people who are hyper local, 208 would stand out to them.
Yeah, it would make sense to them.
But then you went to Dr. Dustin Portela. So how did you decide to evolve your personal brand name to Dr. Dustin Portela?
After a couple of years, the following on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube had really grown significantly. And looking at the metrics on my accounts, it was clear that my followers were from all over the world. And 208 Skin Doc was not something that was going to resonate with anybody except a small percentage of people in my local area. And I felt that if I'm going to be a brand, I wanted to lead with my name. I wanted to have people see my picture, see my brand, see my name, and just identify it with me, because most of them were never going to become patients of mine in the clinic. So I worked with the platforms directly, because at that point I had a large enough following that I was verified and I had a contact that I could reach out to, so that we could switch to those new names and really start to build a cohesive brand just around my name as a Medfluencer.
But I actually think it's important now, because it's almost like in the early days of AOL or Instagram, people had a moniker, or they had tall blonde girl and they would have some sort of username. And then it also moved to actual people's names. So I know that that was also a pretty big trend from a social perspective. And also as a persona, people, they want to say, okay, who's that guy? That guy that's in Idaho. I think he has some numbers in front of his name. But then it's harder, I think, also to remember.
Yeah, it is harder to remember, and it's just not connected. It just doesn't portray the personality in the same way as just using your name.
Right. So then Dr. Dustin Portela, we see it everywhere. And then now you are Dr. Dustin.
Yeah, I largely identify myself as Dr. Dustin when I'm speaking in videos. All of my social media handles are still Dr. Dustin Portela. And I did try initially when we were switching over to Dr. Dustin Portela, and there were a couple of platforms that I could get at Dr. Dustin on, but I couldn't get it on all of the platforms. And for me, it was important to have the same name on all platforms, so that if somebody found me in one place, they could easily search for me in another place under the exact same name. But when I speak on a video, I usually will just say Dr. Dustin.
Which totally makes sense, because this morning I was looking for my trainer, I box, and I knew she had, let's call it an alias, and I couldn't remember what it was on Instagram. Call it mom brain. I'm not sure what it was, but I was searching because it's not the same on all of her channels. So from a consistency perspective, from a brand perspective, from just a recognition, I think it's super helpful to stay the same.
I agree with you on that. And it's been helpful for me as far as people finding me on one platform versus another, and being able to just recognize a consistent brand, not just in the name, but in everything else that I do.
So speaking of brand, so a big part of the brand, starting with the foundation with the name, but also there's colors, there's logos, there's a website, there's like brand support outside of just the social channels. So I guess first, how did you decide what channels to use outside of social to make sure that you had a solid brand foundation? And then from like a color perspective, how did you decide to do it? Like, what did you take into consideration?
So, one of the things that you're going to do as you start to set up a brand is I think one of the first things you want to do is take an inventory of other people in your space, see what they are doing. And as I looked around at other doctor/influencers, I started to see some that were really good with branding and some that really didn't seem to have a cohesive brand strategy. Maybe it was just that their name wasn't the same on every channel, or they had a different profile picture everywhere. And one thing that I noticed is that the ones that were the best at it, in my opinion, tended to have the same profile picture on all of the different platforms. I saw that they would have the same font in their thumbnails or on their videos. And so I kind of got an idea of the things that would make a brand. And I did try to tinker with that a little bit myself. I tend to like the color blue. You can see it in the background behind me. So I often would use blue text on screen in all of my videos. And I had the same profile picture everywhere. But as my platforms grew, I wanted to level up. I wanted it to look more professional. And I had just done my own little Photoshop tweaks and basically done the work myself. And it was okay, but it certainly didn't have a professional feel to it in the beginning. And so I did want to seek out a professional branding company to help me with that. And this is not necessarily something everybody needs to do, especially at the beginning, but the time may come where you want to. You can start with professional branding, and I know we'll get into all of the different things that means by finding a contractor on a freelance site, something like Fiverr or Upwork, where you can see examples of things that they've done. But it was recommended to me to use an agency that helps to create branding, which I did contract with. And we had many meetings with them where we went back and forth on all of the different elements of what would eventually become the brand that you see today.
Two things I want to remark on is that my past, my history, I grew up, as they say, I'm going to put this in air quotes since we're on video, is I grew up professionally at L'Oreal, which I think, besides being an incredible school for training for someone like me that didn't go to business school, but just the best in the beauty and the best marketers and some of the smartest people I've ever met. One of the first things that I learned, and I still use today, is what does good look like? And this is exactly what you said. You have to define for yourself, no matter where you are, what does good look like and where do you want to be? And I think the easiest thing to do is to look at your peers. Look at someone. Maybe you're going to say someone doesn't do the same thing or they're in a different specialty than I am. But still, for yourself, what are you striving for? What do you think is realistic? What could be similar? Or more importantly, what don't you like? Maybe there are things that you notice that I want to make sure I don't do that. So I think that that's so important.
Yeah, 100%. So when I look at one of the best as far as medical branding, I would have to point towards Dr. Mike. I think that he has done it really well. He's an OG on social media for doctors, and he really has developed a very consistent brand across all of his platforms.
Very true. And I think it's also his name is recognizable and you automatically think of that because of the larger brand.
Yeah. And we can look at, not just social media, but we have guys like Dr. Oz or Dr. Drew. Regardless of your opinion of what they do or who they are, they have developed a very cohesive brand where you hear their name and you automatically know a lot about them.
Totally. And a part of who they are is also what we would call their persona. So how you show up, your tone of voice, your content, your captions. And I know that, social branding is living and breathing, but again, has it always been the same for you? Like what guided you? Is it the same thing of learning from others? Is it just your evolution into your identity? I'm just super curious.
I think a brand is very important, but you don't have to be so rigid that it never changes. So clearly, if you go back to the early days of TikTok for me, my brand strategy was very weak at that time. And as time went on, I started using white text with a blue background. That was a very consistent thing for a while. But even my physical appearance has changed a lot over the course of my social media career. I had hair when I started.
I love when they bring up the older pictures. That makes me laugh so hard.
Yeah. I got braces during COVID. It was perfect because there was a, mask. I was going to the gym a lot. I gained a lot of weight going to the gym, got a lot more fit.
Won a bodybuilding contest.
Did a bodybuilding contest and showcased that on social media. So just my physical appearance changed over time. But recognizing that as my content elevated and evolved, my branding could as well. And it's not something you want to change all the time, but there are times when it can change, and that's okay to change. And that's when we contracted with the branding agency. And there's so many that you can use out there. The one that we used did a great job And they're actually a local company to us. So we were able to meet with them and we discussed things like the font that we would use. I wanted something that was bold, but very clear. I didn't want a script. I didn't want cursive to be my logo. And I wanted very clean colors that mostly were a little bit more on the darker side, but we have a little bit of color introduced there. We even did a photo shoot for new headshots and everything. And in the end, they gave me my logos, a symbol where it's just my initials. They gave me the fonts that we would use. They gave me the colors that would become everything that I use in my thumbnails. And those are things that I will use consistently if I go to create a new asset, whether that's a new thumbnail or a slide deck, if I'm going to pitch something like we pitched the mobile clinic to different brands. And so we have that consistent branding that when anybody sees it, they're going to be able to associate it with me.
I think also what's helpful about a branding agency is that they gave you, I remember looking at like 5 or 6 logos. So they look at your vision, they listen to your vision, and then they bring it to life, right? So then they come to you. So it's a very iterative process that you can be as involved or uninvolved as you want. That's part of the beauty of this, is it's ever changing, or it can be as extensive or as simple as you want.
Yeah. And so now we're very happy with the assets that we have when it's the logos, the textures, the colors, all of those things. And then the only thing that I'll change is every year or so, I'll update my headshots. I don't want to be one of those people who has a 20-year-old headshot and you don't even look like that anymore. And clearly I don't look like what I did 5 years ago. So that's something that I'll update. And then I'll use the same headshot across all of my social media platforms on the profile picture.
Totally. And so speaking of what you use across all of your channels or tools, it's always about, I think a part of your brand that mostly came from you is about education and really your reason for being. So in the beginning of social media, it was really about, I think, your expertise driving potential patients. And now you have a platform, right? So it's no longer this marketing. I mean, it's marketing for sure, but it's a platform. And what you do, which is so incredible, is that you make complex information digestible, which isn't easy for a lot of people to do. And so many people just think social media is about trends or about doing a dance and something that you see over and over, that they just kind of are doing things for the sake of doing it. And so what I wanted to find out more, or I think is interesting to share, is that from a content perspective, how do you decide not just what content to share, but I think more of like the format? How do you stay relevant, keep your content fresh and engaging, and also true to your brand?
One of the key aspects of that is just consistency. So I do post very consistently across all social media platforms, and my team helps with that. I create the content, then I hand it off to an editor, and then my team will get those assets posted. But I think that it's very important for me in my position, education, whether that is myth busting, if something has been incorrect, whether that's a current event happening where some new medicine has come onto the market. So, I did several videos on Ozempic because that is applicable in dermatology. And I take these education pieces and I don't feel the pressure to try to include everything in a single video about that topic, because we know that attention spans are very short on social media. And so if I can get across 1 or 2 key points in a video and then maybe use that topic to create more than one video, that's what seems to work for me, and it resonates more with my audience. So showing up in that way where we do bite-sized information and understanding that when you write on the internet or when you speak, from what I understand, they say it's best to do that at a 3rd grade level. And that's when you're going to create something that is going to be understood by the majority of people who might come across it. And you want to make it as simple as possible. And some of the videos have gotten complex, but I try, if I do say something complex, I try to then break it down or use an analogy to make it more simple and easy to understand. Because ultimately, people need to know the basics of what you should be doing to take care of your skin or your health. And they may not need to know all of the more in-depth specifics on the physiologic mechanisms that are going on in the body. And so if we can simplify that, and I think that it helps that my dad was an educator. He's a high school teacher. He teaches science. And so watching him teach, going through his class, seeing the way that he educates and breaks things down to be understandable, even though they're complex topics. So I had a good example in that. And ultimately, the word doctor means teacher. And we have to be able to teach our patients or teach the people that we speak to online in a way that they're going to make actionable in their lives.
And I think that that's the consistent part of your brand, because I think it's very tempting to jump on these trends. It's very tempting to think, oh, this is going to get me views. How do I get views? And you're right. It's consistency. It's understanding what your audience want, but remaining true to who you are at the same time, because then that's also a way of like reinforcing the brand that you've worked so hard to build.
Absolutely. So when we look at trends or we look at, other things, if you have a message that you want to get across, it's okay to sprinkle in other types of content, but that can't become the main thing, because then people are going to follow you for something that you created that is not really what you're about. And then when you start posting your other content for what you're really about, the people that followed you because you did something funny on a trend, they're probably going to unfollow you because they realize that this isn't what that page is about. So I think it's okay to dip your toes in the water once in a while. I always try to pull in some education, even into funny trends, whether that's on screen text or in the caption, so that when somebody follows me for content that's outside of my norm, they're still getting at least a little taste of what I'm really about.
And I think that's actually a very good point. I wanted to share a little story about MB Social. And when we launched MB Social, I was a solopreneur. I had just come out of working at L'Oreal for 15 years. And I kind of knew the things that I was supposed to do. And I had a graphic designer suggest to me that having a color that would stand out, that would resonate with the beauty community, since that's who I was targeting. And so we started to build the logo around a bright color, which now has evolved to be pink. But to be honest, we struggled at first. And I was actually telling my team about this, which I kind of forgot. But if you think about MB Social, the actual words together looks like MBS or Mercedes-Benz. And so I didn't want it to be like MBS and have this confusing name that people didn't know how to pronounce. And then as it is, the only URL we could buy was mimibsocial.com, since MB Social was taken. So now we make this extra effort to call out MB Social wherever we can. And there are still people and clients that say Mimi Social or Mimi B Social. So we have some work to do, or maybe I can finally get the URL, or maybe we'll change it to mb.social. I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but I think it's really important as you're thinking about the brand name. And every time I see an email that says, or a call on my calendar, like meet with Mimi B Social or Mimi Social, I kind of chuckled to myself and realized that from our branding, we still have a lot of work to do.
I think that's an important point when people are just getting started on this journey. We talked about getting the same profile name, the same handle across all the platforms. But even if you're not ready to start posting, secure those names, and just so you have the pages. But I would also recommend that people buy the domain name of their own name. So I also have drdustinportella.com. That houses my main web page. So that's just another thing that is continuous across my social presence, my internet presence. I buy too many domain names, actually. So I have drdustinportella.net, drdustinportella.org, and they all redirect to my same website. So that is something that you can secure your own name, because if for some reason you do get to be huge, somebody else will try to buy that name and make a buck off turning it around and selling it to you. And to buy a domain name is like $12 a year. So it's very cheap to just secure it, sit on it until you're really ready to do something with it. And I've done the same thing with my practice. The practice website is dermatologyboise.com, but I also own dermatologymeridian.com, dermatologycaldwell.com, and all of those redirect to my main webpage because I didn't want somebody else to get those. So I purchased them at the same time just to try to own as much of the space for me as I could.
That's really smart. I mean, I'm sure there is a long line of people who want MB Social. I can imagine that there are people who are fighting for it, but I think I should really look into mb.social. That's what we did for our Instagram channel. That's mbsocial.agency, since MB Social actually was not available. But what's interesting also is when we talk about websites and we talk about URLs, it was interesting because as I was building my brand, I really paid very specific attention to the wording, because what we were doing at the time was super new. And I wanted to clearly communicate our offering as well as establish credibility, since I was coming from a big brand like L'Oreal. So who is this person? And it was a new service. So I learned all about the importance of branding from that perspective of visual communication, keywords, user experience, and overall consistency. Now, fast forward 10 years, our goal is the same, but it's not just me. We're a team. So the team now has to be able to pass on and effectively communicate our message, our values, our DNA. Therefore, together, we have to work on who we are, what we want to be, and what makes us stand out. So it's actually a question we've always asked ourselves, and we've come up with some cool replies on how are we different? How do we stand out? Our brand has evolved with the social media landscape, as did our offering. When I started, we were only focused on social media management. And look where we are today. We work with amazing talent like you. I'm the worst at self-promotion. I always say cobbler with no shoes because our business really grew by word of mouth. And now we're more active on social media with clear goals and we know who we are talking to and why. So I think that there's something really to be said about what phase you are in your business, where you are in that process, that it's okay not to have everything figured out. But as Dustin was saying, from a starting point, think about what you want, what your goals are, and what you want to represent.
Yeah, and you can go out and at least lay the groundwork for that, even if you're not going to be active on all social platforms from the get-go. But you can lay out that groundwork as you start to identify what you want your brand to be and who you want to speak to and what kind of message you want to deliver consistently.
And also, when you're looking at social media, I think that somebody should be able to look at your page and know who you're speaking to. I think that's something that should be very clear and something that anybody that knows you or not kind of gets the sense just by looking. They should be able to see it very clearly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it can evolve over time. You can improve over time. You don't have to be perfect to start. You just have to start.
Agree. And sometimes starting is the hardest part. When you're a founder, you're very critical. You want it to be perfect. And every piece of advice I've always heard from any successful entrepreneur or founder is they say, just start. They say, just start, just do it, and it will come, it will evolve. And that's not always so easy.
I can personally think of many times where I wish I had done something earlier in my life, whether that's YouTube. I had the opportunity to start it years before I did, and it would be so much bigger than it is right now. But as they say, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Today.
I was going to say it's the right time. The time is right when it's right. I mean, I think even for this, the fact that we started this and we're starting it now is amazing. And it's this idea that we've been talking about and now we're making it happen, which I'm so excited about.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what everybody can do with this information and see more of our colleagues online educating and helping people improve their health. In this episode, we hope that you learned that building a brand isn't just about the visuals. It's about telling your story, staying true to your values, and consistently engaging with your audience.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Be sure to follow us on Instagram. The link will be in our show notes. Remember to share this episode with someone you know who could use help on their personal brand.